All right, we're live on Periscope, on YouTube. We're recording on Anchor. Hopefully this one will be good quality because, as always, we always have technical difficulties. That should be the name of this show. It should be called Technical Difficulties Live with Pardes. Technical Difficulties Live with Pardes. And tonight's topic is actually, the reason I found it was because I'm a Hopkins student and I was, looking for some things online. I found this. It wasn't on purpose, but I was like, this is a big story. A Hopkins professor who was fired for unchaining a group of anti-cop protesters from the walls of a major building in the Baltimore campus of Johns Hopkins, and then he gets fired. He gets hired by Facebook. The whole thing is crazy. So we're gonna read about it. I'm gonna talk about it. Winston Churchill is also, we're both wearing matching hats and glasses. So it's great. Life is good. Hey, Joe. All right. I don't normally use Snapchat, other than just trying to make videos, funny videos so I can post on Twitter. I don't usually use Snapchat. But lately, I've been using Snapchat a lot. And it's kind of fun. I'm kind of getting used to it, which is a shame because Snapchat, there's no point in investing in Snapchat. Nothing's going to stay up. So why would I invest in Snapchat? But other than it's addictive. So this is actually, someone is asking if I became an Orthodox Jew. Now that I think about it, this really, really does look like, I should have saved this for a live stream about Orthodox Judaism. Because it really, really does look like that. It really does make me look Orthodox. Why didn't I think about this? I didn't even think about it. It really does. Wow. Okay. Well, on that note, alright, so this guy named Daniel Povey, who very expressly is not a liberal, he's a conservative, or I don't know if he's actually a conservative, but he's just not a progressive in the 21st century sense. Okay, so he's not about social justice, and all that stuff, but I don't know if he's actually conservative. He just seems like tired of the, in his word, progressive bull shit. So yeah, I'm trying to be very careful with my language because I don't want this video to be demonetized. Anyway, Daniel Povey was a non-tenured associate research professor of speech and language processing. He broke into, and this is according to Inside Higher Ed, which is very biased about the story. So they say he broke into a student sit-in earlier this year with bolt cutters. When they say he broke into it, it means he literally just showed up to a place where a group of student protesters who were protesting cop violence, they were protesting police, and so they all chained themselves to the walls, to the staircases, to the doors of the main hall, administrative hall of JHU in Baltimore, of the main campus, and he shows up with a bolt cutter, which is actually pretty funny if you think about it. He shows up with a bolt cutter and walks over to these chains that the student chained themselves up with, and he starts cutting the chains. How funny is that? And because of that, and then when that happened, the students were like, oh, he came to our protest, he broke into our sit-in, which there's no breaking into because they were literally in the hall, okay? He broke into our sit-in, and he brought a bolt cutter, and then he tried to... And then there was violence. What was the violence? They posted a video on it. I didn't see any violence. I saw someone with a bolt cutter try and cut these chains, which... It looks violent, but it doesn't look violent against the students. It just looks like he's trying to break the chains. He's being violent against the chains. But it became a whole thing. Students started to make noise about it. The students who were protesting cops now started protesting Povey. And Professor Povey, or Associate Professor Povey, Daniel Povey, he... Instead of being like, oh, I am sorry, whatever, he started doing it more. He was like, I mean, not the bolt cutting, but he started pushing back, and he was like, I'm not going to take any of your garbage. I'm not going to bow down to you. You know, you guys are you're not learning. You have to go back to your studies. You're shutting down this whole school. Because also the student protesters who had chained themselves to the walls, they had also forced a shutdown of the school. I think it was like a good 35 days of shutdown. So, let's see what happened. How many days was the shutdown? All right, 35 days. So it was on the 35th day that he did this. And they forced a shutdown of the main administrative building, tie themselves to the walls, railing, staircase. Povey, this professor, says that he was attacked. He wasn't attacking anybody. And hey, Chino. And it's funny, it actually happened inside the Garland Hall at Hopkins, which is, I'm a student at Hopkins, by the way, in case anyone didn't notice. It's funny because when I was at UCLA, we also had a Garland Hall there. So that's interesting. Something to think about. So these students are protesting cop violence or whatever. And so they're protesting cops, and he shows up, whatever, and then last week, he shared a letter on his website saying, I'm sorry that I was fired from my job at Johns Hopkins, and because of this whole thing that happened, and this, the students accusing me of violence. And then he listed what happened. He said, here's what actually happened. I was not being violent. People were being violent against me. And in his post, he says, I am aware that some people are trying to cancel me and get me fired from my next job. By the way, his next job is working at Facebook. See if I care, he says. And he says, I'll tell you this, though, whatever happens, I will never apologize and I will never back down. The normal script is that I am supposed to get down on my knees and say, please accept me back into your midst, liberal America. I accept that I was wrong. No way, he says. F you. This is the first time I saw a professor do this. I can't remember any other time I saw a professor who's being treated like this stand up to a liberal mob. This is the first time I saw something like this. Someone is asking what the hat is all about. I honestly don't know why I wore this hat. I just thought it's funny if Winston Churchill wears this hat. But now that I'm thinking about it, it really looks like an Orthodox. I look Orthodox. It looks like an Orthodox Jew hat, and I think this is like the hat that my brother wears. And now it's just weird that I'm wearing it. Do you want me to read to you what Daniel Povey says? He says, everyone, I am leaving to take a private sector job in Seattle starting August 19th. That's next week. I will still be working with my students and collaborators here remotely. As you'll see from this letter, I have been fired from Hopkins effective the 31st of August. I arranged a backup plan beforehand, so I will be leaving a bit earlier. By the way, this happened in May. This protest thing happened in May, and the protests against him happened in May, but we only just found out last week that he's being fired and that he's moving to a new job. He says, please don't blame the Whiting School or Andrew Douglas for this. This comes from higher up. You'll see from the letter that I am not supposed to communicate with almost anyone at Hopkins. Technically, I am just putting this on the web, and if you find it, you find it. I don't expect this will come out as a surprise to most of you, given that 3 months ago I organized a counter-protest against the student occupation of Garland Hall, and a number of people were extremely triggered about that, but I thought you might like a little background. What was never in dispute is that being frustrated as a prospect of a long siege at Garland, where computer servers live, I organized a group of what I called counter-protesters to try to regain control of the building from the students. So Daniel Povey, on this day that students were protesting in the main hall of the building, and they had shut down this administrative building for 35 days, Daniel Povey and a group of students go there they go and Adam, I do see your message. Adam Trahan. So anyway, he takes a group of students to the building at Garland Hall, and he starts doing a counter-protest of the protesters. And they basically, he brings his bolt cutter. He says, this was on the evening of May 8th. There was a scuffle, and I was carried out of the building by the protesters. He says the protesters were the ones who carried him out instead of the other way around. Then they made allegations to the Office of Institutional Equity, saying that I had attacked them. The OIE seems to not have been able to substantiate the allegations that I attacked the protesters, but university leadership still decided that I needed to be fired. The attached letter claims that they are still investigating. I think most likely the true story is either they found the protesters were lying, or they realized that they will never know what happened. What the administration seems to be saying is that I put the students in danger by bringing outsiders into what could have been a dangerous situation. You'll see that the letter states that I believed the group I brought with me could become violent. The actual conversation with their lawyer went like this. After I stated that everyone was under strict instructions to not retaliate if attacked, I was asked whether I was confident that they would be able to follow these instructions no matter what happened. And I shrugged. So essentially, I am being fired for what might have happened while the students are getting off scot-free for things that actually did happen. They actually made false allegations against me, both in public and on Twitter and to the university authorities. They actually attacked me and hurt me. Many of you saw the big scratches on my back. They also threw a lot of punches at the people with me who showed admirable restraint, although I understand one punch was thrown by a person in my group. They actually shut down Garland and inconvenienced thousands of people, requiring the fire department to cut open the doors to get them out. But they suffer no consequences. Am I sensing just a little bit of a double standard? I mean, obviously faculty will be held to higher standards than students, but that's nowhere near enough to account for the differences in treatment. Where could this double standard come from? Well, obviously there's the fact that they were protesting for a left-wing cause and that I was opposing them. Here's where it comes, where he reveals that I'm a conservative. This is where the professor exposes himself as a conservative. He has nothing to lose at this point, right? Actually, he exposed it before, so they knew it. So that's, yeah. But here's where in the letter. Anyway, I'm convinced that that's enough to explain it, though. My feeling is that this mostly has to do with underrepresented minorities, specifically black people and trans people. There seems to be nothing that Americans or American institutions fear more than being accused of racism or similar isms, which leads to ridiculous spectacles like what we're seeing here, where such a huge organization can be paralyzed by a handful of deluded kids. Now, if I had known in advance that everyone inside the building was black, that was what I saw. Although, for media coverage, it seemed like that there may have been a white trans person in the core group, I wouldn't have gone ahead with the counter-protest. I'm not an idiot. I know that as a person who demographically ticks all the oppressor boxes, I would have to be severely punished from opposing such a group. I miscalculated by trusting the coverage in JH newsletter, which seemed to have given a false impression of the demographics of the protest. Their photos show mostly white people. Now, many of the people sitting outside the building were white, but that seems to have been window dressing. They weren't just bystanders, and they were just bystanders, and they didn't do anything except take a bunch of cell phone video. All the people I saw fighting and screaming were black. If it were simply a matter of difference of opinion, I expected that Hopkins would at least pretend to be even-handed. But once race and transgender status enter the picture, I don't think that's possible anymore. So, this professor shows up to a protest. He sees a protest described in the school paper. It's like a group of students, or, the administrative building is shut down 35 days. A group of students had chained themselves to the walls, the doors are chained shut, and it's an anti-cop protest, protesting police brutality. And this professor sees about this in the paper. He's a speech professor, about a speech and language professor. And he sees this in the school paper. And in the school paper, the pictures that were taken, it looked like the protesters were a mixture of white and black kids. And so he tells his he's got a group of students with him. They were gonna go and they were gonna do like a counter protest. They would go and they would be like, no, we're gonna unchain you from the doors. We want to open the doors. And so they basically show up, and instead of seeing what they saw on video, they see that there's a group of, all the protesters are black kids. And he says, if I knew that all the protesters were black kids, I wouldn't be there. He said, if I knew all the protesters, protesting cops were black kids, I wouldn't have said anything. He says, because I don't want to be accused of racism, so I'm not going to show up if that's the demographics of the people who are in the protest. But anyway, he's there. They start cutting the bolts, and then the student protesters apparently start pushing back, and they carry him out of the building, and they fight him. And he says that no violence happened, and the school is trying to fires him based on what the students said. The students said that he was being violent because he brought a bolt cutter. He says no violence happened. The students then call over security. Security, get here! This man is being violent. He brought a bolt cutter. So the security guard who's there in the meantime sees this whole situation, and he's like, I don't see any violence. All I see is a bunch of kids being violent towards a professor. I don't see a professor being violent towards the kids. I see him holding a bolt cutter and being violent with the chains because he's cutting the chains, but I don't see him being violent towards a professor. And someone is saying he shouldn't be punished for doing his job. It's crazy. I I totally agree. Like, the way that professors are treated right now, their pay is really little. The way that they're treated with such little respect. Like, they're professors. They're supposed to be the authority on campus. The authorities on campus, not the other way around. And I don't want, like, mean, power-hungry professors. I just think that there should be a little bit more respect that there isn't. Anyway. So they call the security guard, and then they take a video because because they're capturing, they're clipping videos so they can use it later. They take a video of the security guard and they say, "What did you see? Did you see him being violent?" And the security guard says, "No, I didn't see him being violent. I think you guys are being overdramatic." And they're like, "What? He was being violent." And he's like, the security guard is like, "No, I didn't see him being violent. I saw you guys screaming and yelling at the top of your lungs. I didn't see him being violent." And then, guess what the students do? They post that video online, and they start a campaign to get the security guard fired. So not only did they get this guy, the professor, fired, they're also right now trying to get the security guard fired because the security guard says that he did not see this professor being violent. And it's crazy because they're trying to say that he's sticking up for the professor. Why would he stick up for the professor? The professor is fired. The professor has zero connection with him, and he has nothing. The professor has zero connection with him, and the professor is not even there anymore to even have any leverage over him. Professor is going to work at Facebook, which, by the way, we'll talk about that later. He doesn't think he's going to be able to stay at Facebook long either. He says that because now everybody knows what my political views are, there's no way that Facebook is going to keep me for that long. I saw comments about these special effects. Does this bother you guys? I know that one person mentioned being annoyed by it, but is this like too distracting? I mean, it's really because of Churchill. It's really because I wanted Churchill to have a, I think he looks good. But if it's annoying, then I'll take it off. I'll go back to regular stuff. I'll just use this for the beginning. All right. So, okay. I'll do a poll. I'll do a poll about this. Well, I don't think anyone's being trying to be offensive. I think it's just some people are just distracted a little bit because this is distracting. It's in the way. So, we'll do a poll. We'll see what because I don't see, I'm not the one watching these videos. You're the one watching these videos. I just have to sit here and, I don't have to watch these. So it really matters to me what you guys think. I'm going to do a poll. Anyway, let's continue reading the letter that he writes. He says, "I'm aware that it's a huge violation for me of social norms for me to say publicly that I think whites or males are being discriminated against." Oh boy! JHU professor says that he thinks whites and males are being discriminated against. Of course, they fired him. "As far as I can tell, there are 3 specific circumstances in which it's acceptable for a white male in the left of center America to allude publicly to these types of double standards: to justify them, to advocate for their adoption, to deny that they exist at all. Clearly what I'm doing here doesn't fall into any of these 3 categories, But the truth is, I left the bounds of left-wing respectability some time ago. White males in this environment seem to be expected to constantly atone for their existence by telegraphing their exclusive concern for every demographic group but their own, like a neutered puppy dog or some Justin Trudeau man-child. It's pathetic, in my opinion, and I don't accept it at all. I am not prepared to apologize for being who I am. I don't think that empathy should preclude critical thinking or basic self-respect. I don't accept that a person should have carte blanche to disrupt everyone's lives just because of their minority status. And I don't feel that it's right that I should be fired for opposing a group whose victimhood makes them politically unassailable. This might sound very controversial to some people here, but to me, it seems like common sense. After writing the words above, I can hear in my head a chorus of marginalized voices crying, but, we're triggered! Hate! White supremacy! Transphobia! And demanding special protection. I expect that some people will characterize my plea for equal treatment as an incitement to genocide. Let them. Unlike some people here, I have the mental strength to not be manipulated by these kinds of histrionics. I don't need the approval of victim groups to bolster my self-esteem, and I'm capable of weathering a little outrage. The fact that I have career options helps, obviously. There is a difference between tolerance and cowardice. There is a difference between broad-mindedness and self-hatred, and no one should claim that they are bravely defending oppressed classes, when in reality, they're just too timid, self-conscious, or mentally feeble to stop themselves from being manipulated by their advocates. Males educated in America seem to be uniquely supine in this regard. Is this something they put in cafeteria food? Perceptive readers may see the above as an appeal to masculinity. Yes, that's essentially what it is. The obvious response for a progressive would be to put the adjective toxic in front of the word masculinity and then throw it back at me. Okay, I'm aware that in the progressive word, male is bad and female is good. Just as Orwell's Animal Farm, it was 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. To round it out, you can add non-white good, white bad, and so on. And you have a nice little moral system, one that may be perfectly self-consistent. I like this guy, by the way. I like reading this guy's letter. This guy is good. I can see why he got a job out of Facebook right away. I don't know if Facebook actually knew his political views when they fired him, which is why he seems worried that, he's probably going to get fired from this next job too, because of his political views that now everybody knows about. Or, I don't even know if political, I would just say his cultural views, his views on social justice and the way that, liberal Americans are treating demographics right now. Now, I view moral systems as arbitrary and subjective. It's just a particular assignment of people, actions, thoughts, events, artifacts, and so on. The categories of good and bad typically reinforced by myths or cherry-picked facts, and held together by some more general principles or concepts. So from a certain abstract point of view, the progressive moral system is on the same footing as any other. What I do find very odd is that any straight white male would buy into it. It's the same as if a gay Jew were to join the Nazi Party and begin endlessly apologizing for his ancestors having lent money to Aryans at too high rates of interest, and agreeing that he needs to recognize his problematic Jewishness and toxic homosexuality, stop talking, and make space for Aryan voices to be heard. He might even take pride in having acknowledged the uniquely cancerous and exploitative nature of the Jewish people, despite being one himself. So, is this person virtuous, or is he just too easily manipulated? You decide. By the way, he's describing a hypothetical situation. He's not actually just saying this about Jews or gay people. He says, you decide. I know we're approaching cerebral hemorrhage territory here for left-of-center readers, but it's true. There are many things said by American progressives where if you replace white patriarchy and women of color with Jewish capital and Aryan youth, and add a picture of a blonde boy with a swastika or two, you'd have a very serviceable Nazi propaganda poster. Think about it. I mean, I get why this guy was fired. I think he's awesome. I think this guy, everything he's writing is just wow. It's well written. I mean, he's a speech and language professor, so that's expected. But it's like, it's well written. He's good. It's very rational. And I'm not surprised he's fired though. All these views here, it's very strong views and very not accepted. Exxon Trapola says you should frequent quotes so these words don't demonetize your video. Yes, I should definitely use quote unquote. So I don't know if the algorithm will catch it when I say quote unquote. There are a lot of words in here that I shouldn't have said. Like the word Nazi. I shouldn't have said that. So maybe if I say quote unquote, the algorithm will catch that. I don't know. So, I mean, it's a really long letter. It goes on and on and on. It goes on and it describes some very real cases from very real problems about the whole social justice system, the way that we look at culture, the culture war. Everything he says is so rational. But it's not surprising that he got fired. Here's a letter from Andrew Douglas, the vice dean, which, by the way, Povey says it was not Andrew Douglas's decision, even though he was the one who sent the letter. It didn't seem like it was under his control. It was the dean whose fault it was, who was the one behind this. It wasn't the vice dean who sent this letter. He says you were placed on administrative leave. Leave. All right. So we are hereby terminating your appointment with the university. You will not be eligible for employment with the university in the future. All right. Because you currently serve as a primary research advisor for approximately 20 graduate students, of whom 5 are expecting to complete their doctoral degree requirements either this summer or in the fall, and who have asked for and require your assistance to complete their PhD degrees, and in order to transition your other student advisees to new advisors, we are seeking to minimize the negative impact of your termination on these students. So, if the students want to still work with him, Oliver says, Pardes is probably making 10 cents per video or something. Growing the channel is likely more valuable than the meager earnings at this point. From the live videos, actually, what I will be earning from is going to be super chats. So that's what I'm going to, because with live videos, you can't really control what you're saying, so it's much harder to watch what you're saying the whole time. With edited videos, you can just edit those bad parts out. and you won't get demonetized. So but for live videos, it's harder to watch out for those things, and that's why the super chats are going to carry me through with the live videos. So with Povey, with this professor, Daniel Povey, they tell him that you are not to have any sort of contact with any student at Hopkins, no communication, no contact, but he's also the research, advisor for about 20 graduate students at Hopkins. Some of them are getting their doctorate degrees, and so they now have the option of getting a new advisor if they want to. They will be the only ones who can still be in touch with him if they choose to. And someone is asking about the fuzziness of my videos. I think something is going off. I don't know. Something is weird about this. And so just a bunch of technical difficulties, as always. We will see what the problem is. I will have my people figure it out. I will have Winston Churchill figure it out. Something is up. It's not normally like this. It's not normally like this. So, we'll see. Alright. So Facebook now hires this professor after all that. Facebook hires a professor after he stormed a building occupied by protesters. Facebook told CNBC it has hired Daniel Povey, a speech recognition researcher who was fired this week from Johns Hopkins University. Okay. Povey announced his firing from the school in a public letter, saying, "White males in this environment seem to be expected to constantly atone for their existence." Povey told CNBC he does not expect to last very long at any big Silicon Valley company after expressing the kind of opinions that I have expressed in my leaving message. So Facebook confirmed this on Monday. On Monday, that they had hired him. Speech recognition researcher. So they hired him, I guess, to work on, to spy on people, probably, for Facebook. Okay. Povey did not only work at Hopkins, he also used to be a researcher at Microsoft as well as IBM. So he's got a long record of working with speech recognition. So he was fired after he used bolt cutters to attempt to forcibly enter one of the school's buildings that had been occupied by professors. Do you hear how ridiculous this sounds? Forcibly enter one of the buildings that were occupied by professors. In other words, these professors had chained the doors of the building so no one can get in, and the school's being shut down. And this professor tries to get in the building, and he brings a group of students with him in order to make a point, and then he takes a bolt cutter and starts forcing the chains open. And so now they're saying he's forcing the doors open. It's like, dude, he's opening the chains, which he's trying to stop a bad situation from where I'm seeing it. And he wasn't using the bolt cutters on anyone. He was using it to open the door. He was using it to get in the school because he's a professor and that's his job, to teach students in a school and for the school to not be shut down for 35 days. Okay. All right. On Thursday, Povey, okay, so this is last Thursday, Povey published a note explaining his actions. He said, I may not have my job, but at least I still have my dignity and my independence of thought. That's a very powerful statement. All right. He says, When this whole thing started, I told my friends, if the worst comes to the worst, I can always go to China or Russia. But I'll tell you this, whatever happens, I will never apologize and I will never back down. He's going to work out of Facebook's offices in Seattle starting August 19th. And he will be working on speech recognition and report to Mike Seltzer, who is a Facebook applied research scientist. In April, CNBC reported that Facebook is building a new artificial intelligence voice assistant led by a team in Redmond, Washington. This is actually sounds really creepy. So they're basically hiring this guy to help them do this like robotic speech thing for Facebook. So this is actually really cool. Remember how we talked about it on one of our other live streams? We talked about Alexa and Siri, and so all these different big tech companies are competing for who's going to have a better artificial intelligence who's going to have a better artificial intelligence product that will recognize people's speech and give them what they want. So this guy, Daniel Povey, is being hired at Facebook to start Facebook's new voice assistant. Is that crazy? So Facebook is actually starting this new thing. We heard about it, we talked about it, like, wow, Facebook is next. Facebook is going to have its own Alexa. And guess who's going to be working on that team? Daniel Povey, the speech recognition guy. Povey says he's hoping for the best in his new role. He would not surprise if a controversy followed him. So he's basically bracing to be fired from this new job too. He says, I wouldn't expect to last very long at any big Silicon Valley after expressing the kinds of opinions that I have expressed. And so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with Daniel Povey. Really exciting project that they're working on. Working on like their own Alexa. That's exciting. And so we'll see what happens. I'm so tired. Paul Nye says this dude should go on a speech tour with Jordan Peterson. You know what? He's like Jordan Peterson, except like a younger voice. You know what I mean? Like Jordan Peterson's very he sounds very academic, and this guy is an academic too. Like he's a professor, but his language is a lot more like student level. You know what I mean? Which is good. It's not bad. Just it's a different flair. Jesus says, I almost missed Pardes. I drank too much Heineken and fell asleep. Glad I saw the cowboy hat. I'm glad you saw it too. It's, mostly because Winston Churchill's a cowboy. Raleigh says, anyone who thinks AI, voice recognition, etc. won't be used for spying and subverting people on the right in the future is utterly naive. Yeah, you know what? It's definitely, I think it's crazy. I think first of all, I think Facebook should go down like yesterday. I think Facebook should go down. And they need to be very, very, very heavily regulated. Also, it's ironic that they're having a guy who was fired for being conservative, right, at Hopkins. They're hiring this guy to be the person who builds that spying technology. Very interesting. So the students are still protesting. The students who got Povey fired, they're saying that they're protesting cops for not caring about them and for they're protesting cops for like violence and whatever, for being racist because they're being violence against black people. And then this security guard says, well, I didn't see Professor Povey being violent. And then they go, see, this is another example of cop, this is another example of police racism, or police, indifference, or, so that's another thing that they're using to prove their point. Okay. Wow, these students had chained themselves overnight. Okay. And so basically he got fired for bringing the bolt cutter, and so they said that he could do something violent. He didn't, but he could. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully we wish Daniel Povey well. Well, we're gonna stay updated with him and see what happens to him. Is Daniel Povey on Facebook? Yes, he is. Daniel Povey is on Facebook. Okay, I'm gonna start retweeting this guy so you see him. And then you guys can start interacting with him. Very interesting. This guy is actually really, really interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna retweet some of Daniel Povey's stuff. Damn. Okay. All right. Okay, any questions? People and children and last stand says Jew. I'm wearing a Jew hat. Okay, any questions from the people? In case you've been wondering why I've been so relaxed lately, it's because I've been listening to a lot of these meditation books, and I've been listening to Eckhart Tolle, the spiritual guru guy. I've been just spending a lot of time on my yoga mat, Hey! This hat. Been spending time on my yoga mat. And, I've been trying to take it easy because I have really bad anxiety, and when that happens, you have to try and do things that make you feel less anxiety so that you don't snap at people and you don't go crazy and do things that you regret later. And one thing that my dad always advised is that whenever you feel like, anxiety is creeping up on you and you're kind of getting to that place, just stay away from whatever it is that's making you feel like that. And it doesn't mean you should run away from everything in your life and stay away from everybody and whatever, keep yourself in a hole, but just in that moment that you feel it coming, just step away from it a little bit. Let your anxiety go away, write it out in a place that's like a safe environment with not a lot of anxiety. And then once you get over it a little more, go back to whatever you're doing. Someone is saying, Jesus says, you're braver than you think, Pardes. Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you. Okay. So, someone's commenting on the viewer level here. I'm really surprised about the numbers that we have. I'm really surprised. I shouldn't be because this channel has been growing consistently since we started it. And I'm just surprised because I don't know, I keep surprising myself, but somehow it just keeps going up, and we're like, it's not something that I expected, but for some reason, the universe is making this happen, which is really cool. Adam says, yoga, do you want me to teach you? Okay, never mind. Okay. All right. Any other questions? By the way, last night I talked about Miley Cyrus. I talked about Taylor Swift giving someone like $2,000 to pay for college. It's just nothing. Not even $4,000 or $5,000. Nothing to pay for college. People have hundreds of $1,000s in loan. Anyway, so I talked about that. Taylor Swift paying $2,000 out of her hundreds of millions of dollars for someone to pay for college, and people freaking out about it and talking about how kind she is. When even if it was more, she obviously did it as a political stunt, and the whole thing is so cheap. And so Tyra Banks did one of those a couple days ago, where she goes out and it looks like such a political stunt. So it's such a PR stunt. She goes out, she takes a picture of this girl. She just happens to be passing by just as this girl happens to be posing in this model outfit in front of a group of like boxes, and everyone is acting surprised. Tyra Banks is here, and like for some reason this person is ready with his camera and he's acting surprised, and for some reason she's ready, hair and makeup done perfectly, dressed like a model in front of a bunch of boxes, because that's what models do, that's what people do, is like they get all dressed up like a model, and they wear all their clothes and their hair and makeup is done while they're standing in front of a group of boxes. And so then and then very, very conveniently this video gets on the internet and becomes like trending news, and the whole thing is just garbage. Okay. Any questions? Someone is asking about my P.O. box. I do not have a P.O. box set up yet, but eventually. And I see you guys want to send me t-shirts so I can wear them on my show. So eventually, we'll do that. Okay, any questions? We can talk about Baltimore SOHOOTINGS next time. I'm not spelling it out because I don't want to get demonetized. Maybe the word demonetized is gonna get me demonetized. I don't know. Anyway, see you all tomorrow. Subscribe to my channel on YouTube, like this video on Periscope and on YouTube, and check out my Anchor podcast, because that's where I record the audio version of this. Alright, see you all tomorrow.